Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. The alarm buzzed like it always did, kicking off the star of our day. Charlotte, my wife, and I reluctantly rolled out of bed. The early rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, and I groaned, feeling unusually worn out as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. "Why do you sound like you're getting old?" Charlotte teased, already making her way to the bathroom. "After last night, I think I am," I joked, still thinking about how wild the previous evening had been. Charlotte had a knack for keeping things interesting. Today marked the beginning of her business trip, which meant I'd be on my own for the next week. I wasn't exactly looking forward to it. I heard the water running in the shower and considered joining her, but I needed a few more minutes to myself. Last night had taken a toll, and I wasn't in any rush. Charlotte came bouncing back into the bedroom, full of energy, which made me feel even slower in comparison. "Come on, get up, sleepyhead. We've got bills to pay," she said with a playful nudge. All right, I'm up," I replied, dragging myself to the bathroom to splash some water on my face. After freshening up, we had breakfast together before going our separate ways, Charlotte heading to the airport, and me to my job. We both worked at a manufacturing company in Chicago. Charlotte was a corporate lawyer, specializing in negotiations, and her current trip to Seattle was for talks with a tech firm about a new contract. She traveled a few times a year for work, usually gone for about a week each time. Charlotte, 34, had finished law school at Ohio State over a decade ago. She stood about 5 feet 5 inches, weighed around 130 pounds, and had a figure that always caught attention. From the very start, Charlotte had me wrapped around her finger. "My name is Mike Brooks, and I'm an engineer at the same company where Charlotte practices law. I'm 38 years old, 6 feet 2 inches, and I try to stay in shape by hitting the gym regularly. Charlotte and I are golf lovers, often playing with friends. Our relationship really began to take off during a company outing. For me, it was love at first sight, and we were married just 6 months later. Now, 7 years into marriage, we just bought the house of our dreams, with plans to start a family soon. Charlotte was looking forward to becoming a stay-at-home mom once we had kids, a plan that was supported by both of our parents, who lived close by. In fact, she was planning to stop taking birth control after this trip. After breakfast, I helped Charlotte pack up her car for the trip. She kissed me goodbye, and I noticed her eyes misting up as she got behind the wheel. "I really hope we don't have to say goodbye like this much longer," I said, feeling hopeful about the future we were building together. "I can't wait until the trip ends," she said, clearly not enjoying these farewells any more than I did. "I hate saying goodbye as much as you do," I reassured her. "How about we order in on Friday night when you get back? Relax with some takeout." "That sounds amazing. See you then," she said before pulling out of the driveway. I stood there watching her car disappear down the road, then headed inside to get ready for my workday. At the office, after grabbing a coffee, I went straight to my desk. That's when my phone rang. "Brooks here," I answered. "Hey, Mike, can you swing by my office for a moment?" My boss, Mr. Patterson, asked. "Sure thing. I'm on my way," I said, taking my coffee along with me. When I got there, he motioned for me to sit down. "Mike, I've got an opportunity you might want to consider. Since Charlotte's away, it crossed my mind that our tech guy in California, Greg Andrews, is out sick, and there's a client in Los Angeles that needs some help. You're familiar with the equipment. Could you head out there to sort it out?" I paused for a moment, thinking. Actually, I've got nothing pressing here, and with Charlotte gone, I'm free. When do they need me? "As soon as possible," he replied. "Mary will take care of your travel details. Make sure to contact the client and get the full picture of what's going on." "Got it. I'll head out this afternoon so I can be at the client's first thing tomorrow," I said, suddenly feeling excited about the impromptu trip. "Safe travels, Mike," Mr. Patterson said, Wrapping up our conversation, I stopped by Mary's desk to give her a heads up about my travel arrangements, and then called the client to get more information about their problem. With that done, I headed home to pack. Driving home, I couldn't help but grin as an idea popped into my head. If I wrap things up early, I could surprise Charlotte in Seattle. The thought of showing up unannounced had me more excited about the trip. While waiting at the airport for my flight, I tried to call Charlotte, but she didn't pick up. I left a message saying I'd be at my parents' place for a few days and that she could reach me on my cell. Everything went smoothly, and by Tuesday afternoon, I had the client's issue resolved. Their equipment running smoothly. Wasting no time, I booked a flight to Seattle, aiming to arrive by 9 p.m. After checking out of my hotel, I headed to the San Francisco airport, grabbed dinner, and while eating, Charlotte called. We chatted briefly. She asked how things were going at my parents' place, and I kept up the act. Charlotte mentioned that negotiations were progressing but that she was exhausted and planned to spend the evening resting in her hotel room. After exchanging a quick goodbye, we hung up. I boarded the plane, nerves tightening with each passing moment. By the time I reached Charlotte's high-end hotel around 9:45 p.m., my stomach was already in knots. After a brief check with the front desk, they handed me a keycard to her suite. The walk to the room felt longer than it should have, my mind racing with excitement and anticipation. I'd planned a surprise to make her smile, to sweep her off her feet with an unexpected visit. But when I stepped quietly into the suite, something immediately felt off. The only light came from the lamp by her closed laptop on the desk. The room was eerily silent, and there was no sign of Charlotte. I sat down my suitcase, a flicker of confusion growing. Where was she? I checked the bedroom. Empty. The bathroom. Empty too. A strange unease began to settle in. Maybe she was still out. But it was almost 10 p.m. Shouldn't she be back by now? I was debating whether to wait or go look for her when I noticed the door to the adjoining suite was slightly ajar. My pulse quickened. I pushed it open, slipping silently inside, only to find the living room empty. But then I heard a sound, a muffled voice, followed by movement coming from the bedroom. Instinctively, I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Something was wrong. With my heart pounding and a sick feeling swirling in my stomach, I crept closer to the bedroom door, peeking through the crack. My world shattered in an instant. There on the bed was Charlotte. She was fully undressed, and next to her was some man, his face turned away. But his presence was unmistakable. My breath hitched, and for a split second, fury surged through me. Every fiber of my being screamed to burst in there, to tear into the room and demand an explanation, to confront them both and let my anger loose. But somehow I stopped myself. The rage boiled under my skin, but I forced it down, swallowing back the betrayal burning in my throat. My hand shook as I stepped back, retreating into her suite. My thoughts raced, and then a cold, calculating calm took over. I grabbed my digital camera from my suitcase, the one I had planned to use to capture memories of this trip, and adjusted it for low light, switching off the flash. I knew what I had to do. I returned to the bedroom door, silently positioning myself in the shadows. They were so wrapped up in each other that they didn't even notice me standing there. With each quiet click of the shutter, I captured their betrayal, proof of everything I had just witnessed. When I had enough, I slipped away, back into her suite. My emotions felt raw and exposed, but I had to keep it together. I couldn't let them see me unravel. As I scanned the room, my eyes landed on her open briefcase. I rifled through it, finding a business card with the name Roger Pearson, the lead negotiator from our company. I pocketed it. Back at her desk, I connected my camera to her laptop, transferring the damning photos onto her computer. I didn't stop there. I set one of the images as her desktop background, knowing she'd see it the next time she opened her laptop. The weight of what I had done started to hit me, but I couldn't stop now. I packed up my things and slipped out of the room, the betrayal pressing down on my chest like a boulder. I handed the keycard back to the front desk, my hand shaking slightly as I left the building. My next move was automatic. I called the airline, desperate to get out of there. Luckily, there was an early morning flight back to Chicago that would have me home by mid-morning. The timing was perfect. I knew by then Charlotte would be starting her day, likely turning on her laptop for the negotiation. That would be the moment she realized I knew everything. I checked into a nearby motel to kill the hours until my flight, but I couldn't sleep. The images from that hotel room played on a relentless loop in my head, each one more sickening than the last. I let myself cry, the anger, sadness, and betrayal all spilling out. By the time morning rolled around, I was emotionally drained, but determined. This marriage was over. Back in Chicago, as soon as I got into my car, my phone started ringing. It was Charlotte. I stared at her name on the screen, my hand hovering over the decline button, before I finally turned off the phone altogether. I couldn't talk to her. Not now. Not ever. When I got home, the house phone started ringing, her name flashing on the caller ID again. I didn't answer. This time, her voicemail came through. "Mike, you need to call me back. It's important." Her voice was frantic, but I felt nothing. She had lost the right to urgency. I changed into some old clothes and left to pick up a U-Haul truck. There was no time to waste. By the afternoon, Charlotte would be back, and I needed to be long gone before then. Over the next few hours, I packed everything, every reminder of the life we once had. It all went into storage. I had already made an appointment with the lawyer, so the next stop was his office to initiate the divorce. Though I briefly considered using her affair as the basis for the divorce, I decided on irreconcilable differences. I'd keep the evidence of her infidelity in my back pocket, just in case things got ugly. After the lawyer's office, I went straight to the bank. I transferred half of everything in our shared accounts into new ones under my name. I did the same with our investments, consulting with my advisor. It all felt so final, so cold, but it had to be done. By the time I arrived at my parents' house, suitcase in hand, I was a shell of the man I'd been just 24 hours before. I walked through the front door, the weight of it all crashing down on me. When I walked into my parents' house, I could see the worry on my mom's face right away. "Mike, what's going on? Charlotte's been calling here nonstop looking for you. Did you tell her you'd be here?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I sat down heavily, the weight of the last 24 hours pressing down hard. My dad, who had retired a few years back, watched quietly from across the room. Taking a deep breath, I told them everything. The cheating, the photos, the fact that my marriage was over. I watched disbelief cloud their faces as I explained the whole mess. "Charlotte? Cheating?" my mom said, shaking her head as if trying to wake up from a bad dream. My dad remained silent, his eyes fixed on the table. "Yeah, it's over. I started the process for divorce," I said, forcing the words out, hoping that by saying them aloud, I'd feel some kind of release. But instead, it all still felt so raw, so unreal. "Can I stay here for a while?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "At least until I can get a place sorted out." They didn't hesitate. "Of course, you can stay, Mike. Stay as long as you need," my mom said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. My gut had been telling me this would happen, and I was right. Around evening, just as we were about to sit down for dinner, the doorbell rang. I didn't need to look. I already knew who it was. My dad answered the door, and seconds later, Charlotte walked in, her face pale, eyes wide with a mix of fear and desperation. "Mike, why haven't you been picking up my calls? I needed to talk to you. All your stuff has gone from the house," she stammered, her voice shaking. I forced myself to stay calm, even though everything inside me wanted to scream. "I thought the note I left on your laptop would explain everything you needed to know," I replied, coldly but without raising my voice. Her face went white, as if all the blood had drained from it. "So it was you who left that picture on my computer," she whispered. "Mike, can we please talk somewhere?" "Please," she begged, her eyes pleading. But I didn't waver. "Charlotte, I'm not your honey anymore. There's nothing left to talk about. I've started the divorce process. Anything that needs to be said can be handled by the lawyers," I said, the finality of my words hanging in the air between us. I could see the panic in her eyes, but I didn't stop. "Seeing what you did in Seattle killed any feelings I have for you," I added, my voice unwavering. "Now please leave. I'd like to eat my dinner in peace." "Please, Mike, don't do this," she begged, tears pooling in her eyes. "Let's at least have a real conversation before ending things like this." Her desperation clawed at me, but I couldn't let it in. I had to stay strong. "What could you possibly say to excuse cheating on me? It wasn't like you were defending yourself," I shot back, my voice colder than I expected. "You might want to give your boyfriend, Roger, a heads up. I'm sure his wife will love to hear what he's been up to." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Mike, can we please just talk this through?" she cried, the panic in her voice only growing. But I was done. "Just leave, Charlotte. You're ruining my dinner," I said flatly, without any emotion. Then, almost as an afterthought, I added, "Here's an idea. Write me a letter. Maybe you can use that clever lawyer brain of yours to explain why it was okay to destroy our marriage. I'm sure you'll find a way to pin it all on me." She looked at me, heartbroken, her tears streaming down her face, but I held firm. "Goodbye, Charlotte," I said firmly, leaving no room for her to argue. Slowly, she turned and walked out, and I watched her go, a part of me wanting to feel relief. But instead, all I felt was an emptiness I couldn't shake. Once she was gone, my parents sat in stunned silence, still processing everything that had just unfolded. "Mike, that was harsh," my mom said quietly, breaking the silence. "Mom, would you like to see the pictures I took of her with another man?" "That's the real harsh part," I replied, unable to hold back the edge in my voice. "She completely disrespected me, and I can't just accept that. How could I ever trust her again? Would you really want me to have kids with someone like that?" There was a long pause before my dad finally spoke. "I get it, son," he said softly, "but maybe after some time, you'll start to see things differently." "I don't think so, Dad," I replied, shaking my head. "Can we just drop it and finish dinner?" I asked, eager to move on from the conversation. "Sure, Mike," he said, though his voice was heavy with reluctance. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Charlotte was replaying everything in her mind. That Monday morning, when she left for the trip, she had felt a mix of sadness and excitement, sad to leave me behind, but hopeful for our future, for the family we had been planning. Everything had seemed perfect, the timing right, our lives on track. On the flight to Seattle, she had sat next to Roger Pearson, the company's chief negotiator. He was her work partner, the guy she'd spent countless hours negotiating deals with. As they chatted, the conversation had turned from work to their families. Roger knew about her plans to leave her job once she got pregnant, and he even mentioned how much he'd miss working with her when she became a stay-at-home mom. Roger, at 48, had been married for 20 years and had teenagers. They knew each other well, and their working relationship had evolved over the years. But a decade ago, things had shifted. Late-night meetings had turned into something more, something they both tried to rationalize as a way to ease the stress of work. They had convinced themselves it wasn't really cheating because it somehow made things better at home. For a while, she had felt guilty about the affair, and they had stopped. But when negotiations became particularly tough, Roger suggested they rekindle their old arrangement, and she had agreed, telling herself it was a necessary release. The thrill and danger had a strange way of making things more exciting with me, which told her guilt. But now, everything had spiraled out of control. The second morning of the trip, after a long day of negotiations, Charlotte had sat down at the table, opened her laptop, and froze. Staring back at her was the damning photo of her and Roger. caught in their secret. Panic flooded her as Roger, sitting next to her, noticed too. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, his voice sharp. "I don't know, Roger. I swear that wasn't there last time I used my laptop," she said, her voice barely steady. "But that's you," he said, pointing at the screen. "And that could be me." Her mind raced, trying to make sense of how it had all unraveled so quickly. "But how could anyone have taken that picture? I've been with my laptop the entire trip, either in my room or in yours," she stammered, terrified. "You better check if anyone had access to your room last night. And try to contact Mike. Find out where he was," Roger said, panic creeping into his own voice. Charlotte nodded, but her heart sank further. It couldn't have been Mike. Could it? I was drenched in sweat. If Mike had put that photo on my laptop, it meant one thing. Our marriage was probably over, but I wasn't ready to give up just yet. I had to get back to the hotel and figure things out. The hotel staff quickly got me a cab, and before I knew it, I was back in my room. My first stop was the reception desk. I asked if anyone had entered my room last night. After a quick check, the receptionist told me that a Mr. Mike Brooks was given a key at 9:45 p.m. and returned it 30 minutes later. That hit me like a brick. Mike had been here. He must have seen everything. Suddenly, it all felt very real. My marriage might actually be over. The thought of losing Mike, the man I loved more than anything, made my chest tighten. But I wasn't going to let him go without a fight. I dialed his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. His office? The same. I left him a message, saying it was really important for him to call me back. His secretary told me he was on a business trip in California and would be back tomorrow. So he had been in California, but he must have stopped here on his way back. I guess we both got surprised in the worst way. I called his parents next. They said they hadn't seen him in a few days but would tell him to call me if they heard from him. The silence from his end was deafening, but I wasn't ready to give up hope. I still believed there was a chance to fix things, so I packed up and booked the next flight back to Chicago. Before leaving, I called Roger to tell him what was happening. There was a pause on the other end before he said, "Charlotte, we might be facing divorces, or maybe worse." I blinked, caught off guard. "Worse? What could be worse than divorce?" I asked. Roger's tone was serious. "Our company has strict policies about managers dating. If word gets out, we could both lose our jobs." I hadn't thought of that. Losing Mike already felt like the world was crashing down. Losing my job on top of it, I wasn't sure I could handle that. But I pushed the thought aside for now. I need to get back to Chicago and talk to Mike. Maybe there's still a way to work things out, I said, more to convince myself than Roger. "Keep me updated," Roger replied before we hung up. I hurried to the airport, taking the hotel's limo. I'm a flight back, my mind raced. I rehearsed everything I wanted to say to Mike, hoping I could make him see that what happened was emotional, not just physical. Maybe if he understood that, we'd have a chance to rebuild. But when I walked into our house and saw his clothes were gone, I knew. He was done. My heart sank. He knew everything and had left. I tried calling him again and again, but still no answer. Desperate, I drove to his parents' house. When I saw him there, it was like looking at a stranger. He was cold, distant, and completely closed off. My words didn't reach him. He told me flat out that he was filing for divorce, and nothing I could say would change his mind. When he suggested writing a letter to explain myself, it felt like a cruel twist of a knife. I left, crying all the way to the car. Everything we had planned, growing old together, starting a family, seeing grandchildren, it all seemed to evaporate in that moment. I cried until I couldn't anymore. And then, selfishly, I started worrying about whether I'd be too old to have kids by the time I found someone new. Eventually, I pulled myself together, started the car, and drove back to our empty house, feeling lost. Meanwhile, Mike's story continued. After a restless night, tormented by the images of Charlotte and Roger, He woke up early and went downstairs to make coffee at his parents' place. Trying to distract himself, he grabbed his camera and laptop, determined to find something in those photos. As he scrolled through the images, his eyes narrowed on Roger's right arm. Something was there. A tattoo. Mike zoomed in, and there was a heart tattoo with Lynn 8 written inside it. Lynn 8, Roger's wife's name. That was the proof Mike had been looking for. Feeling a new wave of determination, he showered, got dressed, and prepared for the day. When he came back downstairs, his mom was busy making breakfast. He kissed her on the cheek and headed out the door, ready to take action. At work, he immediately made a few CDs with the photos and a close-up of Roger's tattoo, printing out several copies and putting them in a folder. With everything prepared, Mike marched straight to HR to meet with Chad, the HR manager. Chad greeted him with a friendly smile, as they had played golf together a few times. Mike laid the photos in front of Chad, watching his reaction. "What's this, Mike?" Chad asked, sounding both curious and slightly amused. Mike's face remained serious. "Sorry, Chad, but this isn't a joke. That's my wife, Charlotte, and Roger Pearson. These were taken Tuesday night in Roger's hotel room in Seattle. They were there for negotiations with the company." Chad's face paled as he pieced it together. "Oh man, Mike, I'm really sorry to hear that. What do you want to do about this?" "Well, their job contracts clearly state no romantic relationships between managers. You could fire them both for breaking that rule. We've never actually enforced that rule before. Are you sure you want to go down this path? It'll make the affair public. And are you sure about divorcing Charlotte?" Chad asked. Mike paused for a moment, considering Chad's words. But his mind was made up. He nodded. "Yeah, Chad, I'm sure. I had already instructed my lawyer to start drafting the divorce papers, but if the company didn't take action, I was ready to sue. Don't worry, Mike. I'll talk to our legal team and make sure this gets handled," Chad assured him. With that settled, Mike headed over to his boss, Mr. Patterson, to fill him in on what was happening in his personal life. When he explained the situation about Charlotte and Roger, Mr. Patterson was genuinely shocked and concerned. "Take the rest of the week off as vacation," he said without hesitation. I nodded in appreciation, and before I left, he complimented me on my work in California. Apparently, the client was thrilled with how quickly I'd fixed their production line. And on top of that, Mr. Patterson mentioned that the California engineer was retiring soon due to health reasons. He hinted that I might be a good fit for the position if I wanted it. "I'll think about it and let you know next week," I replied, grateful for the opportunity, but not quite ready to decide just yet. As I was leaving his office, Mary, his secretary, stopped me. "Mike, your wife stopped by earlier looking for you. She said she'd come back later." I sighed. "Mary, if she comes back, please tell her I don't want to see her." Mary's eyes widened. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize there was an issue." "There's a big issue. Charlotte and Roger Pearson were cheating," I said, keeping my tone steady. I figured the news would spread around the office by lunchtime, since Mary liked to chat. But that was fine. I had bigger things on my mind. Back at my desk, I decided to make an important call. Roger's wife, Linda, and I had met at work events over the years, and now I had to break the news to her. "Linda, it's Mike Brooks. How are you?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "I'm doing all right, Mike. Roger mentioned you might call, but didn't say why," she responded. "Do you have a moment? We need to talk. I'm free now. Come over. You know where we live, right?" "I'll be there in 15 minutes, I said, hanging up. When I arrived at their house, I was nervous but resolute. I couldn't let Roger off easy, and I didn't want to leave Linda in the dark. "Hi, Mike, come in. Want some coffee?" she offered, welcoming me into the living room. "That would be great, thanks," I replied. After a few moments, she returned with 2 cups of coffee and sat down. "So, what's going on?" she asked, her face calm but expectant. I took a breath. I'll get straight to it, Linda. I caught Roger and Charlotte together in Seattle. I'm divorcing her, and I started the process to get them both fired from the company. I wanted to give you a heads up because it's going to become public soon. She took a sip of coffee, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what to expect. Mike, I had my suspicions about Roger for a while, especially on his business trips. But I didn't want to believe it, she admitted. I didn't want to think it was true. I'm really sorry, Linda. I've got photos if you need proof. Linda nodded slowly. Yeah, leave me a copy. I'll look at them later when I'm ready. I knew this day would come, but it's still tough. I could see the sadness in her eyes, but she was handling it with grace. I feel the same way, I said. Charlotte and I were close to starting a family, but I can't see a future with someone I can't trust. The mother of my kids needs to be someone I can respect. I understand, Mike. Thanks for being honest with me. I'd rather hear it from you first than through rumors. I'm sure Roger's going to feel the weight of it soon enough. And who knows, maybe Charlotte will too. Linda replied, her voice a mixture of sadness and resolve. I wish it had just been a one-time thing. It would have been easier to forgive. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know, I said as I stood to leave. Thanks, Mike. I'll be okay, she said, offering a small but genuine smile. 6 months have passed since I'd filed for divorce. This morning, I received the final papers, and it's official. I am no longer married to Charlotte. It feels like a weight has been lifted. I haven't seen or spoken to her since that day at my parents' house. My lawyer handled everything, and I let go of the house, the furniture, and all the things we bought on credit. Cutting ties was the best thing for me. Without my income, Charlotte had to sell the house, and though she struggled financially at first, she managed to bounce back. She's a smart lawyer and found a new job within a month. From what I've heard, she's even started dating again. Good for her. I hope she's honest with her new boyfriend about why our marriage ended. Linda divorced Roger too. He lost his job and found another one, but with a lower salary. He's having trouble keeping up with alimony and child support. As for me, I've moved on and found peace. I relocated to Ventura, California, a serene coastal town halfway between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. It's a quiet place, and I've settled into an apartment building with lots of singles and young couples. The cost of living is high here, but I'm managing just fine. I've even started seeing someone new, a woman who lives in my building. Like me, she's been through a divorce, and we found a lot of comfort in each other's company. We're taking things slow, but there's a calmness in this new relationship that feels right. Trust is important, and with both of us having gone through tough times, we understand that better than anyone. We're not rushing into anything, but the future looks bright. Maybe kids are still in the cards. Life is unpredictable, but I'm ready for whatever comes next. For now, I'm enjoying this new chapter. Work is going well, I'm in a peaceful place, and I'm taking life as it comes. Sometimes things don't work out as planned, but that's okay. I've learned that there's always something better waiting on the other side. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.